It's really a great pleasure for me to be here, to say a few words to you. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the de Klerk Foundation for organizing this afternoon. Thank you to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation for co-organizing this event. And I would say it's really great to think together, to think jointly about South Africa's position in the world from various perspectives. As you would expect, me being a diplomat, I would like to start with a couple of thoughts from an international perspective. For us, as an international partner of South Africa, this country on the southern tip of Africa is an indispensable partner on the continent. Of course, it's the largest economy on the continent, but it should also be an anchor of stability with an influence and a capacity to project stability beyond its borders. What do I mean by this? Looking at Africa today, one can sometimes become a bit gloomy. Yes, there is growth in Ghana, there is economic dynamism in Kenya, there is South Africa's own progress down the lane of a green economic transition. But there's also a lot of reasons for huge concern. Take the situation in the Sahel, where entire states are undermined by political unrest and extremist and terrorist threats. Take the civil war in Sudan, take the still fragile situation in Ethiopia, and now the situation in Eastern DRC has spilled totally out of control. These crises and conflicts in the Sahel, at the Horn of Africa, and the DRC and other regions have intensified in recent years. And overcoming these crises has become even more challenging. And the expectations vis-à-vis South Africa on the continent and beyond are growing. This country, South Africa, is making a great effort to live up to this responsibility in the UN, in the African Union, as well as in SADC, through diplomacy and troop deployment. But the truth is that the expectations and the needs are only growing, and there's no magic solution to the multiple security challenges we face on our continents. So who is going to tackle these challenges? Ubani. Azulula. Kanjani lezes in Kinga. How we are going to solve these problems? We always talk about African solutions to African problems, and no doubt the African Union has a role to play. Regional organizations like the SADC, EAC, ECOWAS in West Africa, which is actually in deep trouble itself, they have a role to play. But important states need to play a role too. Who, if not South Africa, is in a position to take responsibility? That is the role we, as partners, would see for South Africa to add stability on this continent. It comes at a cost, as we have tragically seen in Eastern Congo, where over a dozen of South African soldiers lost their lives. I know that there's a domestic debate about the deployment of South African troops within the SADC mission to Eastern Congo. We have seen quite an exchange of words between the leaders of South Africa and Rwanda. I won't go into this, and I won't go into the internal political debate, as I'm a diplomat, not a politician. I would only say that South Africa's active commitment to stability on the continent is appreciated by international partners, and it is needed. 2 years ago, we had the African Union negotiations in Pretoria on an accord to end the civil war in Ethiopia. And the Pretoria Agreement still forms the basis for the peace process to move forward. So this commitment is appreciated, and it is indispensable. But South Africa's role plays out also beyond the African continent. It is a heavyweight among the countries of the Global South. Maybe not an economic heavyweight, if you compare it with other major countries of the Global South, like China, like India, like Brazil, but certainly it is a heavyweight of opinion, a kind of spokesperson for issues of the Global South, be it at the UN, for the reform of the United Nations, be it for the reform of international financial institutions or negotiations about the global pandemic treaty. And as such, South Africa's voice is heard and taken seriously. This year, South Africa is in the spotlight, chairing the G20 as the first African country to do so. We strongly support South Africa's presidency under the theme Solidarity, Equality and Sustainability. Not so long ago, South Africa presided over the BRICS group. I'm neither a member nor a fan of BRICS. But truth be told, during its presidency, South Africa proved that it is capable to preside professionally and sometimes even elegantly over a very heterogeneous group of nations. Back in the G20, we would also welcome that South Africa aims at continuity after Brazil's presidency when it comes to the development and to development issues, to climate issues, and we also support the focus on Africa. With the Compact with Africa, we have a G20 initiative that was launched during the German G20 presidency in 2017. This initiative has been anchored in the G20 finance track via the Africa Advisory Group, which is co-chaired by Germany and South Africa. So we hope that the Compact, as a key initiative for improving the investment climate in Africa, can be taken further during South Africa's G20 presidency this year. All this does not mean that we always have the same opinion. Actually, we have had intense foreign policy discussions, for instance, after Russia started its illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. The same is true with the view to the situation in the Middle East, obviously. But let me start where we agree on this one. Both South Africa and Germany see the two-state solution as the only viable and sustainable path to take. We, of course, welcome the agreement on a ceasefire and the release of hostages, and we hope that this agreement may pave the way to a permanent end to the war. But of course, when the ANC government at the end of 2023 chose to take Israel to the International Court of Justice based on the Genocide Convention of 1948, we, Germany, did not agree with South Africa's legal position. However, while we have a different legal position, we appreciated South Africa's decision to call the International Court of Justice, because that's why we have it. It's better to go to court to solve disputes than to try to solve disputes outside our joint rules and regulations. I think the public protector would agree, yeah? To us, this is the reason why we have such multilateral institutions. This is also about the respect for rules as the basis for an international order. And here, many countries, including Germany, would appreciate South Africa's strong and active support for the rules-based international order, for international law and multilateral institutions. It is at the heart of our convictions and our international credo as well. So there, obviously, we would like to cooperate, particularly as times are not easy for the rule of law in international relations. When a nuclear power and a member of the United Nations Security Council invades a neighboring country, what a shame. When other superpowers threaten to take control of islands or canals belonging or to being under the authority of others, including sovereign states, I mean, that's the world we are living in currently. So those of us who support international rules need to cooperate. Sidinga uku bambisana. Dus baie belangrijk dat ons samwerk. And there's a role, a strong role for South Africa. For instance, we appreciated South Africa's support to Namibia and Germany as co-facilitators for the UN Pact of the Future, which we recently endorsed in New York. We agree that there's a need to reform the United Nations Security Council, whose composition reflects the world, not of today, but of 80 years ago. Africa must be appropriately represented in this body with 2 permanent seats, and South Africa, I'm not anticipating the decision by the international community, but certainly South Africa is a very strong candidate for one of those 2 seats. But it's not only the United Nations Security Council, we also work closely together with South Africa pursuing the Women, Peace and Security agenda at the United Nations based on Resolution 1325. We work together to reform peacekeeping. And we both serve currently on the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, where we cooperate and exchange to push forward a progressive agenda. Talking about human rights, we would see South Africa as a champion on the African continent. Of course, South Africa has come a long way and is maybe destined to play such a role like nobody else. After all, it overcame the repressive system of apartheid, and we remember President de Klerk's role, who opened the way to tear down the walls of this apartheid system. Then South Africa installed a democratic system in a process of truly historic dimensions. It passed a very progressive constitution. Christoph van der Rede already spoke about it. And some say that the way South Africa overcame past injustices gives it the moral power to speak up for human rights today. So we actively work both with South Africa's government as with civil society institutions on human rights, various organizations, with the various departments, with the city of Cape Town, with NGOs, tackling issues such as protecting and promoting women's access to land and property rights, or providing support to whistleblowers, important issues when it comes to civil society. And of course, there's nowhere in Africa where the LGBTI community has so much space as here in South Africa. Cape Town, of course, is many things, but some say it's even the queer capital of Africa. I won't buy into this, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. And no doubt there are issues between legal rights and their implementation. But let me just say that we regularly join hands also with South African institutions in support of the queer community over the continent for Pride events or the big ILGA conference, the International Coalition for Equal Rights, a few weeks back here in Cape Town. So no wonder, I mean, if you look at it from various perspectives, that many other countries would attach a big importance to South Africa, and that it is an important point of call for many international partners. Tshwane, Pretoria, is said to be the capital with the second most diplomatic missions worldwide. I would love to say Berlin is the first, but it's not true. But Tshwane, Pretoria is the second. In any event, when the German government recently adopted new Africa policy guidelines, this document was also conceived against the background of South Africa as an important partner here on the African continent. I mean, the thinking behind our guidelines was that pressing tasks such as containing the climate crisis, dealing with future pandemics, or maintaining peace and stability cannot be solved without the active participation of the African continent. We need Africa as a strong and capable partner in a rules-based international order, And we think that the core of our relationship with partners in Africa is to work together in the interest and for the benefit of both sides to address global challenges and to solve common problems cooperatively. The basic idea from our side in the future would be to foster what we can achieve together with Africa, not like some said in former times, achieve for Africa. So the idea of partnership is very important in our thinking. And of course also to learn from Africa. And there are certainly a couple of things we could learn from South Africa. Actually today I hope to learn something from Coach Rassi, how to build a successful rugby nation. Because here Germany is clearly lagging behind. Actually we are trying to qualify for the next World Cup because there are 4 more spaces. So there's going to be an additional qualifying round in Europe and maybe we can sneak our way. But then I'll come back to you. And of course, we certainly have a closer look how South Africa succeeded to form a government of national unity consisting of 10 parties within 2 weeks, when it usually takes months in Germany to form a coalition government consisting only of 2 or 3 partners. So there's certainly an issue where we can discuss. So these are just a couple of thoughts from my side. As food for our discussion, of course, we are fully aware that South Africa, like Germany, has quite a number of challenges of its own: unemployment, kickstarting the economy, modernizing infrastructure, managing disagreements within the GNU, the huge foreign policy challenge in Eastern Congo. The papers are full of it every morning. But sometimes I think it's important also to know the outside view and that outside expectations to our countries can be very high, be it G20, be it at the UN, be it on the African continent. I would say the world needs a strong and capable South Africa. As they say, for a better Africa, for a better world. Thank you very much.